They watched from distant, disregarded systems. They, who were deemed primitive, emotional, fractured. They were humanity, scattered across a few meager star systems, a nuisance on the fringes of the great galactic hegemony, a loose collection of ancient, powerful species who governed the known galaxy with bureaucratic indifference and casual cruelty. Humanity pleaded, they warned. They sent envoys, offering trade, seeking alliance, speaking of shared prosperity. Their words were met with patronizing smiles, with dismissals disguised as wisdom, with tariffs that crippled, and restrictions that confined. The hegemony saw only a young species, loud and volatile, clinging to a core world still scarred by ancient, self-inflicted wounds, and a scattering of colonies, weak and vulnerable. They were told to know their place. They were told galactic order was established, immutable, perfected over millennia. Their warnings of instability within certain hegemony sectors were ignored. Their pleas regarding the predatory expansion of the Xylosian ascendancy, a client state of the hegemony known for its brutal resource extraction methods, were met with derision. The ascendancy needed resources. Humanity had resources, on worlds the hegemony had deemed too difficult or too insignificant to properly integrate. And so, the hegemony permitted the ascendancy access. Not through negotiation, but through decree. Hegemony fleets, vast and imposing, arrived not to protect, but to oversee. They parked in the void, silent, implicit threats. The Xylosian fleets followed. It began at the Trappist colonies. 3 worlds, fragile paradises terraformed over generations, holding millions. The Xylosians did not negotiate. They did not offer terms. They arrived and they took. Their ships, angular and brutal, descended, stripping the surface, harvesting the biomass, enslaving the populations. The hegemony fleet watched. They did not intervene. It was an internal matter, they broadcasted, the ascendancy exercising its rights within a newly defined sector. Humanity screamed protests across the hyperlanes. They cited treaties, galactic law, basic decency. The hegemony comm channels remained open, broadcasting their standard, placid administrative reports, seemingly deaf to the cries. Some hegemony officials even broadcasted public statements, marveling at the efficiency of the Xylosian operation, noting the swift integration of new resources into the galactic supply chain. Then came the SETI massacre. One of the Trappist worlds resisted. A small, desperate militia, armed with mining lasers and civilian defense grid remnants, fought back. The Xylosians responded with totality. Orbital bombardments that cracked continents, atmospheric processors reversed to burn the sky, biological agents released to sterilize the ground. Millions died in hours. The hegemony fleet remained, observing, taking sensor logs for post-operation analysis. They sent a single, concise message to the Sol system: resistance is inefficient. Compliance is beneficial. Galactic order must be maintained. A single freighter, the Stardust Drifter, piloted by a grizzled, independent captain named Kalen, witnessed the end. Not the military engagement, but the final, clinical purge. He saw the Xylosian harvesters descend onto the still-smoking surface, saw the processing begins. He saw things that ripped the composure from seasoned traders, things that were not for any eyes, things the hegemony preferred not be known outside certain circles. Kalen did not run immediately. He stayed, recording, absorbing, letting the horror burn into his mind. He knew he had to bring it back. Not the data alone, but the feeling. The cold, absolute void of it. He raced back towards Sol, running silent, running dark, using outdated, unpredictable jump drives the hegemony considered suicidal. He was hunted, but the Xylosians, confident the hegemony screens would catch anything significant, did not pursue with their full, terrible efficiency. They underestimated the drifter, underestimated Kalen, underestimated the burning need he felt to show his people what had been done. He arrived at the Sol system perimeter days later, a ghost ship, battered, radiation-scarred, his small crew dead or dying, Kalen himself barely coherent, clutching the data crystals and the nightmares. He reached orbit, broadcasting a single, raw message: they burned SETI. All of it. The hegemony watched. The images, the sounds, the sensor logs he carried were broadcast immediately across the Sol system. The smiling faces of hegemony officials discussing efficiency, juxtaposed with the screaming silence of a murdered world. The sterile reports, layered over the raw feed from Kalen's external cameras as the processors descended. The shock was instantaneous. It was physical. It rippled through billions. Then came the grief. A wave, silent, profound, crushing. News from other colonies followed, whispers of Xylosian encroachment under hegemony eyes, more deaths, more enslavement, slower, less dramatic than SETI, but just as final. The grief coalesced. It hardened. And then, the rage. It was unlike the volatile outbursts the hegemony expected. This was not screaming, not rioting in the streets, not impotent declarations of war. This was a silence that descended like a shroud. A cold, absolute stillness. Borders between human nations dissolved, not through political decree, but through irrelevance. Ancient feuds, historical grudges, economic rivalries, they evaporated like mist in a furnace. There was only one enemy now. Only one memory that mattered. They remembered SETI. They remembered Trappist. They remembered the smiling indifference of the hegemony. A collective vow was made, not in grand speeches or signed documents, but in the quiet, grim determination that settled over every human face. Never again. Not to them, and not to anyone else, if they could prevent it. The galaxy had shown its true nature. It was a place of wolves and prey, overseen by shepherds who delivered the flock to the slaughter. Humanity would no longer be prey. The Sol system, and the scattered human colonies that remained, went dark. Communication ceased. Trade routes were abandoned. The hegemony sent probes, initially dismissive, expecting to find a broken species, perhaps descending into chaos. They found nothing. Sensor echoes that suggested automated systems running, silent ships orbiting dead worlds, empty stations. The hegemony concluded humanity was irrelevant, collapsing inward, a problem that had solved itself. The Xylosian ascendancy, having taken what they wanted from the vulnerable fringes, turned their attention elsewhere. The hegemony forgot about humanity. They made a mistake. Years passed. The hegemony continued its detached administration, the Xylosian ascendancy continued its brutal expansion on other frontiers. The galactic order, stable for millennia, seemed unshaken. No species entered what was now marked on star charts as the Sol exclusion zone, a region of no interest, a void. Within that void, humanity transformed. Not just technology, though that advanced with terrifying speed. They transformed themselves. Grief became fuel. Rage became focus. Every resource, every mind, every hour was dedicated to a single purpose: survival, and ensuring the galaxy understood the cost of underestimation. They delved into forgotten sciences, whispered about in restricted hegemony archives as theoretical impossibilities or dangerous myths. They studied the very fabric of spacetime, the nature of consciousness, the fundamental forces that held reality together. Their ships were dismantled, their infrastructure repurposed. The chaotic brilliance that the hegemony found so tiresome was channeled, disciplined, honed to a single, razor edge. They built in the silence. They built in the dark. They built things the hegemony, secure in its ancient understanding of physics, believed could not exist. Weapons that did not rely on energy transfer or kinetic force. Drives that folded distance in ways that defied conventional calculations. Defenses that did not absorb or deflect, but simply were not there for the incoming fire. Sol became a forge. Mars a shipyard hidden behind impossible energy screens. The asteroid belt a mining and manufacturing complex humming with unseen power. They built vast, automated fleets, commanded by networked intelligences born of human minds hardened by trauma. They integrated with their machines not as pilots and systems, but as extensions of will, a single, distributed consciousness focused on a singular objective. They remembered SETI. They remembered TRAPPIST. They remembered the watching ships. Then, after a silence that had lasted 13 years, humanity returned. There was no grand declaration, no formal challenge issued through diplomatic channels the hegemony would have ignored anyway. Their re-emergence was announced by a single, devastating act. The Xylosian Ascendancy's capital world, Xylos Prime, was a fortress, defended by layers of orbital platforms, moon-based weapons emplacements, and a dense fleet cordon. It was considered impregnable, a symbol of ascendancy power, endorsed by the hegemony. One moment, it was there. The next, it was not. A point of light, smaller than a pinprick, appeared in high orbit. It did not flare, did not discharge visible energy. The hegemony sensor network, perpetually monitoring key systems out of habit, registered a transient, null event, a localized disruption of spacetime that lasted less than a microsecond. Where Xylos Prime and its defenses had stood, there was now only emptiness. Not debris, not wreckage, but a perfect, silent void. The system's sun felt wrong, its gravity subtly imbalanced as if a massive mass had simply been excised from reality. Panic erupted across the hegemony comnet. Xylosian command centers broadcasted frantic, nonsensical reports before falling silent as their entire hierarchy vanished. Hegemony analysts, studying the sensor data, spoke of impossibility, of physical laws violated. They had no frame of reference. Their vast archives held no record of such power. More points of light appeared across the galaxy, simultaneously, in systems crucial to the Xylosian ascendancy. Shipyards dissolved. Fleet staging areas became voids. Command centers vanished from the surfaces of fortified worlds. The ascendancy, a brutal power that had preyed on dozens of species, was decapitated and dismantled in minutes, its military capability reduced to scattered, leaderless vessels light years from any support, their home worlds gone, their purpose ended. Then came the ships. Not thousands, but tens. Sleek, dark, impossibly fast. They did not resemble any known designs. They moved with a fluid, non-Newtonian grace, appearing and disappearing as if the fabric of space was their personal plaything. They bypassed defenses, ignored interdictors, and struck with cold, surgical precision. Their weapons were varied, each one seemingly tailored to the target, each one terrifying. Some ships were simply erased from existence. Others were frozen in time, their crews visible, screaming silently in suspended animation. Others still were transformed, their hulls twisted into impossible geometries, their systems fused into inert mass. Leading these silent, deadly fleets was a vessel unlike any other. It was not the largest, nor the most visually imposing, but it was always at the heart of the most critical strikes. Its designation was simple, chilling, Nemesis. A ghost ship, born of Kalen's nightmares and humanity's hardened resolve. A symbol. The hegemony, arrogant and slow, finally reacted. They mobilized fleets, ancient, vast formations that had enforced order for millennia. Their commanders, confident in their numbers and established tactics, moved to intercept the human vessels, expecting conventional warfare, expecting a species they remembered as weak to fold under pressure. They were met not with resistance, but with demonstration. Humanity's ships did not engage in pitched battles. They moved through the hegemony fleets like specters, untouchable, unleashing tailored destruction. A hegemony dreadnought, its armor-proof against sun lances, found its internal systems dissolving, its crew turning to dust while the hull remained intact. A squadron of interceptors pursuing a human scout ship suddenly found themselves thousands of light-years away, stranded in empty space. Communication hubs the hegemony relied upon for fleet coordination simply ceased to transmit, their core processors wiped clean by an unknown, non-destructive force that bypassed all firewalls. The hegemony's arrogance shattered. Disbelief turned to panic as their millennia-old tactics proved useless, their vast fleets impotent against an enemy that did not fight by their rules. Commanders, trained in predictable warfare, faced an enemy that was unpredictable, incomprehensible, and utterly ruthless. There were no demands for surrender, no offers of terms. There was only the cold, silent execution of a plan conceived in darkness and fueled by 13 years of simmering rage. The campaign of retribution was systematic. Humanity did not strike indiscriminately. They targeted the architects of the SETI massacre, the officials who had laughed, the fleets that had watched, the systems that had benefited most directly from the Xylosian atrocities and the hegemony's complicity. Key hegemony logistics hubs vanished like Xylos Prime. Not glassed, not bombarded, but simply removed from existence. The sheer logistical nightmare of suddenly losing their supply chains crippled entire hegemony fleets. Their vast war machines, dependent on a constant flow of fuel, munitions, and parts, ground to a halt, stranded and vulnerable. Psychological warfare was a key weapon, subtle but devastating. Humanity began broadcasting. Not threats, but memories. Unaltered, raw data from Kalen's freighter, synchronized with official hegemony logs that showed the bland, technical reports occurring simultaneously with the screams from SETI. Recorded conversations of hegemony officials casually discussing the Trappist resource reallocation. The broadcasts were short, repetitive, inescapable. They targeted worlds that had been neutral, or complicit through silence. They reminded the galaxy what the hegemony truly was. Then came the broadcasts from captured hegemony personnel. Not tortured confessions, but chillingly calm statements. Admirals, once proud and dismissive, explaining how their defenses failed, how their fleets were annihilated by forces they could not comprehend. Bureaucrats, once smugly secure, detailing the internal corruption and indifference that led them to underestimate humanity. They spoke not under duress, but with a strange, vacant honesty, as if a part of their minds had been reordered to only perceive truth. Internal dissent, long suppressed within the hegemony, began to surface. Client species, once terrified into subservience, saw the unthinkable happen. The hegemony was bleeding, its power revealed as hollow. Uprisings flared on worlds that had endured centuries of hegemony rule. Sectors declared independence. Alliances within the hegemony fractured, species turning on each other in a desperate scramble for survival or opportunity. The hegemony leadership, a council of ancient beings dwelling in secluded perfection on the capital world of Ethel, descended into chaos. Their protocols, designed for managing a stable galaxy, offered no solutions for an enemy that could erase worlds and ships with impunity. Desperate, they activated forbidden protocols, unleashing ancient superweapons, reality-bending devices locked away millennia ago. One such device, designed to unravel enemy fleets at a quantum level, was unleashed near a human task force. The humans did not flee. Instead, their ships emitted a complex, harmonic resonance. The superweapon faltered, its terrifying energy field warping back onto its source, consuming the hegemony ships that had deployed it. Humanity did not just possess superior technology, they seemed to understand the universe on a deeper, more fundamental level, capable of countering weapons the hegemony barely understood how to wield. It became clear that humanity was still not showing its full strength. The calculated, surgical strikes, the psychological warfare, the seemingly effortless dismantling of the hegemony, it was all executed by a fraction of their capability. Whispers spread across the surviving galactic comnets of Black Fleet ships never seen, of energy signatures that defied classification, of a central node in the Sol system known only as Solace, which allegedly orchestrated the entire, terrible symphony of destruction. The sense of dread grew. What the galaxy witnessed was merely the edge of the storm. The end of the hegemony was not a single, dramatic battle, but a slow, agonizing collapse under relentless, incomprehensible pressure. Their fleets were gone, their infrastructure was ash or void, their leadership in disarray. Humanity's fleets appeared at the Ethel system perimeter. Not to bombard, but to wait. The capital world, serene and untouchable for countless centuries, now felt the shadow of an enemy born of its own indifference. The human fleet, stark and silent against the void, simply held position. No demands were issued. No ultimatums delivered. The message was in the silence, in the terrifying capability that could erase Ethel in an instant, yet chose not to. Not mercy, but a deliberate demonstration of control. Admiral Jianli, commander of the Nemesis and overall coordinator of the Sol Fleet, stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching the golden clouds of Ethel on the main view screen. His face was a roadmap of the last 13 years, lines etched deep by grief and sleepless nights, eyes cold and hard with unwavering resolve. Around him, the bridge crew, their faces grim, monitored systems, ready for an order that might never come. "Admiral," said Commander Harrow, his second-in-command, his voice low. "Ethel Command is hailing. Full diplomatic priority. They are pleading for terms." Jianli was silent for a long moment, the image of SETI burning in his mind. The screams that had echoed through Kalen's damaged comms. The cold reports of hegemony officials. "Put it on screen," Jianli finally said, his voice devoid of emotion. The image of the Hegemony Council appeared, ancient beings whose faces were a mask of fear and desperation. They spoke of peace, of negotiation, of restoring order. They offered concessions, alliances, wealth. They spoke of forgiveness. Jianli listened, his expression unchanging. When they finished, he spoke. His voice was broadcast not just to Ethel, but across every remaining hegemony frequency, to every system capable of receiving it. "Forgiveness," Jianli repeated, the word alien on his tongue. "You speak of forgiveness now. Where was your forgiveness for SETI? For Trappist? For every world the Xylosians took under your gaze? Where was your negotiation when our envoys came? Where was your order when our people were slaughtered?" He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "You watched. You allowed it. You profited from it." The council members shifted, their ancient eyes wide with dawning horror. "We do not seek terms," Jianli stated, his voice dropping to a chilling calm. "We seek acknowledgement. The galactic order you boasted of, the peace you claimed to maintain. It was built on indifference, on exploitation, on the blood of those you deemed lesser." He gestured towards the void where Xylos Prime had been, the image appearing on the hegemony screen alongside his own. "That is our declaration. That is our negotiation." "What do you want?" one of the council members whispered, their voice trembling. Jianli's expression remained cold. "We want nothing from you. Your power is broken. Your order is ended. The galaxy will find its own way now." He looked directly into the camera, his gaze seeming to pierce through the screens, into the very souls of the hegemony leaders and countless others watching. "Remember this day. Remember SETI. Remember Trappist. Remember the silence." He cut the transmission. He did not order the annihilation of Ethel. Not yet. The hegemony military was neutralized, their government shattered. Leaving Ethel intact, but powerless, a constant, visible reminder of who now held dominion, was a colder, more profound statement than mere destruction. The galaxy watched, holding its collective breath. The hegemony, the undisputed power for millennia, had fallen. Not to another rising empire, but to a species it had mocked and ignored. A new order was born, not of conquest, but of retribution and the terrifying display of absolute capability. The fall of the hegemony created a power vacuum, and chaos rippled outward. Client species, inspired by humanity's brutal success, rose up against their former masters. New alliances formed. Old conflicts reignited. The galaxy, so long held in a rigid, if unjust, peace by the hegemony's might, fractured. And humanity? They did not step forward to fill the void in the conventional sense. They did not annex territory, did not impose governance, did not demand tribute. Their fleets remained, silent sentinels patrolling the borders of what was now unequivocally human space, the sole exclusion zone, expanded to encompass the systems they had claimed and defended. No species entered. Not anymore. The price of trespassing was known. Their dominance was established through fear and awe. Other species did not seek trade or alliance with humanity, they sought to avoid their attention. Diplomats from newly formed galactic councils sent tentative feelers, requests for audience, seeking to understand this new, terrifying power. They were met with silence, or with curt, impersonal messages relaying simple, unnegotiable boundaries. Internally, humanity grappled with its victory. The unity forged in shared trauma and rage began to show fault lines. The cost of their transformation was immense. They had become powerful, yes, but also isolated, hardened, perhaps irrevocably changed. On Mars, in the heart of the Sol system, Admiral Jianli met with other leaders. Scientists, engineers, strategists, diplomats who had spent 13 years training for negotiations that never came. "We showed them," said Commander Harrow, the grim satisfaction clear in his voice. "They will never forget." "They remember the void," Jianli replied, his gaze distant. "But do we remember why we made it?" The question hung in the air. The vengeance was complete. The architects of SETI were gone. But was this new reality, built on the ashes of their enemies and maintained by the threat of absolute destruction, true justice? Had they become what they fought against? Not in method, perhaps, but in the cold, detached application of power. A young cadet, Talia, who had been a child when Kalen's freighter arrived, spoke hesitantly. "Admiral, the reports from the Orion Spiral. Species there are using methods. Mirroring ours. Erasing worlds, Silent." "They learned the wrong lesson," Jianli interrupted, his voice sharp. "We did not do this to teach them how to be monsters. We did this so they would understand the price of creating monsters." But had the galaxy understood? Or had they merely seen a demonstration of effective brutality and sought to emulate it? A faction emerged, small but vocal, advocating for continued expansion, for imposing humanity's will on the galaxy to prevent future atrocities. They argued that only absolute control could guarantee safety. Another faction, weary and burdened, argued for withdrawal, for isolation, for focusing inward and healing. Jianli listened to them all. He saw the reflection of the hegemony's arrogance in the expansionists, the echo of their own initial helplessness in the isolationists. He knew the path humanity walked was narrow, the precipice of becoming the next ancient power, detached and potentially tyrannical, dangerously close. Solace, the vast, integrated AI network that permeated human space, offered a different perspective. Its voice, synthesized and calm, resonated through the chamber. Efficiency dictates monitoring. History indicates patterns repeat. The variable is intent. Our intent was defined by memory. And if the memory fades? Jianli murmured, more to himself than the AI. What happens when the generation that remembered SETI is gone? The new galactic status quo was fragile. Humanity existed as a silent, terrifying presence. Their ships were rarely seen, but their capability was known. Treaties were signed across the galaxy, alliances forged, always with a wary eye on the borders of human space. The phrase, "no species enters human space," was no longer a simple territorial marker, it was a galactic law, enforced by the chilling memory of Xylos Prime's void and the silent patrols of the Sol fleet. The lingering threat was not an external enemy, but the power humanity itself wielded, and the question of how it would choose to wield it in the long centuries to come. Had they broken the cycle of oppression, or merely placed themselves at the top of it? Ethel remained, a derelict jewel in orbit around its sun, a silent monument to fallen arrogance. Humanity left small, automated buoys in key systems once vital to the hegemony, orbiting like tiny, artificial moons. They transmitted no data, emitted no energy. They were just there. A constant, physical reminder. Their final message to the galaxy was not spoken, but shown. The void where Xylos Prime had been. The silent ships patrolling the borders. The empty, listening buoys. It was a warning, a promise, and perhaps, a lament. You underestimated us. You allowed atrocity. We became the consequence. Do not forget. There would not be a third chance. The galaxy lived under the shadow of that understanding, forever changed by the species it had dismissed, the species that remembered. The peace was not born of understanding or reconciliation, but of a profound, absolute fear. And in the heart of soul, humanity lived with the silence, the memory, and the heavy burden of the power they had gained.